North Abilene, Texas, home to farmers, fields, and agriculture. It's about the same distance from here to Lubbock, Texas, if you head east, or Dallas-Fort Worth if west is your destination. It is a town where people commute to and from every day. A town of industry and a town of poverty. For years, hobos have hopped on trains from here in the hopes of finding a better life. But for one man, there is no better life than right here in North Abilene. He is Sheriff Joe Broward, and he has been sheriff here for the last 10 years. Broward is regarded by everyone in Abilene as a man who will always uphold the law. He is revered, admired, and people were proud to know him, especially those who worked with him.
Joe Broward was an amazing sheriff. I mean, he was a good police officer. He had a very analytical mind. He understood completely how people work and how the law worked and how people worked with the law sometimes and against the law other times. He was very concerned about people. He was very concerned that people didn't take the law serious. And you would never find anybody who would take the law more serious than Sheriff Joe Broward.
July 25th, 1998. Joe Broward sits at his desk and catches up on paperwork, a daily routine. Except something out of the ordinary is about to happen. The fax machine in Broward's office starts to spit out a police report, and with a quick glance, Broward can tell this is no ordinary report. He reads the fax intently, only to discover that it has been sent to the wrong police department. Meant for a small-town division in the cold depths of northern Ontario, Canada, the report talks about one Francis Gillian Terpstra, wanted for the brutal murder of Jessica Murdoch in the town of Belleville. For some unknown reason, Broward is convinced that receiving the fax was no accident. He is completely positive that he, and he alone, was chosen by God to catch Terpstra.
Joe Broward was a very multi-faceted man. He liked to delve into the occult, into the paranormal, if you will. There were several occasions where Sheriff Broward would get these cases sort of handed over to him by other counties. And, I can recall a number of times when he'd be sitting at the desk just doing his work, following up on whatever he was doing. And all of a sudden, somebody would come in and hand over one of these cases from, let's say, a neighboring county, like Russet, for example. And all of a sudden, he would just zone out. Like all of a sudden he'd pick up the case and he'd look at it and he'd stare at it and he'd zone out. He'd just lose it. And he'd get up and he'd put on his jacket or whatever and his cowboy hat, because he always wore his cowboy hat at work. And he would just take off. And he could disappear sometimes for, days.
Broward needs to move quickly if he is going to have any chance at all catching Terpstra. Last seen in Belleville after the murder, Terpstra could be just about anywhere in North America. Broward knows that he'll have a better chance of making an arrest if he goes undercover. So he leaves his Texan appearance behind and dresses in shorts and a t-shirt. He packs lightly and sets out to the frozen North Country, that icy domain known as Northern Ontario, Canada. After 2 days of driving and intense thinking, Broward crosses the border into Missouri. Feeling tired and somewhat anxious, he pulls into a gas station to fill his truck and stretch his legs. The break does little to ease his sense of frustration. He has committed to 4 days of driving, leaving his native country for the Arctic north of Canada, and most of all, he has committed to catching a cold-blooded killer. He is aware that he has absolutely no clues, no case history, no communication with the Belleville police. He has nothing. Nothing but a keen awareness that he has been chosen by a higher power to apprehend a dangerous murderer. For Sheriff Joe Broward, the facts don't count. For him, it's all in the hunches. Day 4. Broward enters Michigan at 11:21 a.m. and decides to forego lunch so that he can cross the Canadian border by 4 p.m. If all goes well, he will arrive in Belleville by 1 p.m. the following day. The further away he gets from his hometown of Abilene, the deeper he sinks into uncertainty. Broward considers the possibility that he's on a wild goose chase, but he still can't shake the feeling that he is the chosen one. The next day, Broward enters the chilly country of Canada, northern neighbor to the greatest country on earth. He finds himself in several small towns like Roseanne, Thomasburg, and Actionland. Every town has its own feel, its own personality, but the next town Broward drives through has an unmistakable feel of danger in the air. It is the small town of Tweed, and as Broward drives cautiously through the heavy populated burg, he cannot shake the ominous feeling that something is about to happen. Could it be that Terpstra is hiding out here? Could it be that he is closer to the killer than he imagined? As luck would have it, Broward escapes the little hamlet without a scratch, and finally reaches his destination, Belleville. Driving through the city is no easy task for Broward. He is unfamiliar with the street names and speed zones. He decides that the best thing to do might be to put himself in Terpstra's headspace, to think like him and try to second-guess his next move. Broward believes that a higher power has put this plan in his head. So he finds a shopping mall and begins to acclimate himself to this Canada, and more specifically, this Belleville. Broward's first stop is at the Canadian store, where you can buy beaver pelts, snowsuits, and other Canadian artifacts. Next, he finds a toy store for bigger kids and is shocked at some of the prices. Of course, he is still unfamiliar with Canadian currency. Broward continues through the city, waiting for clues to pounce on him, waiting for something, anything to cry out and say, Terpstra is here. He drives for the better part of the day and finds nothing. Meanwhile, back at the police detachment in North Abilene, the deputy and the rest of the staff are worried about their lost sheriff. Leaving no notes or instructions, Broward's sudden disappearance has everybody thinking foul play.
On the morning that, I'm sorry, I promised I wouldn't do this. On the morning he disappeared, though, we thought maybe, he'd overworked himself, so he slept in. So, we put a call to his home, and there was no answer. We put a call into his sister's, and there was no answer. We put a call into his mother's, and there was no answer. We knew there was something wrong. We knew that something terrible had happened to him, but we could not figure out what it was. And that's when we figured out what had happened, that he had been, in fact, abducted by the UFOs, along with his truck, so that they could, in fact, study the mechanics of the truck.
The next day, Broward gets an early start. He surmises that if he knew what he was looking for, he might better find it. But since he has no clue as to what clue he should be hunting down, he must rely on that old Texas standby, his intuition. Broward drives until noon, then finds a spot by the side of an old country road where he can stop driving and eat a well-deserved lunch. But stopping might not be the best idea for Broward. Not in motion, his mind starts playing tricks on him. He can hear a voice in the back of his head telling him that he's insane for thinking he could catch the Murdoch killer.
I'm gonna get you. I didn't come all this way to go home empty-handed. I'm Joe Broward. You might think you can elude me. It's only temporary. 'Cause I know you're out there. You're out there somewhere. I'm gonna find him. And the world is gonna know that Joe Broward ain't just some sheriff from Abilene, Texas. The world is gonna know that Joe Broward's a hero. You hear me, world? A hero!
Monday, August 25th, 1998. It has been a month since Sheriff Joe Broward left his home detachment in North Abilene, Texas. He becomes accustomed to the Canadian way of life. He even starts each day with a fresh, hot cup of Tiny Tim's coffee. Broward doesn't mind waiting in the long line of cars every morning. In fact, the routine itself lends a little comfort to Broward, who is far away from home, family, and friends. He even becomes quite used to the foreign currency and the sub-zero temperatures that have weathered the rugged sheriff during his quest. Broward welcomes the routine and wonders if he isn't somehow sliding backward, perhaps letting Terpstra slip away. On this particular day, Broward feels compelled to take another look at the strange facts that started his adventure. He sees something that he originally overlooked. Francis Gillian Terpstra murdered Jessica Murdoch in the summer of 1974. Broward realizes that he is now working on a cold case. He sees something else. Murdoch's slain body was found in a park.
Hell, I passed a park not 3 days ago.
Broward heads to the only park he's seen in Belleville, and on the way he tails a gang of tough two-wheelers, thinking that Terpstra might be trying to hide in a crowd. Broward drives on.
Clue.
After a short while, he arrives at the park. As he pulls into the parking lot, he spies a single white garbage bag resting at the bottom of an otherwise empty bin. He is positive that this could be the clue he's been looking for. He stops the truck and gets out to investigate. He approaches the bin and decides not to investigate the bag, in case something gross is inside. Broward does, however, begin scouting the park in search of other clues. The park is relatively quiet as Broward makes his way to the rough and unkind Moira River. Broward follows the river until he can see it no further, and comes to the conclusion that whatever clues may have once lied at the bottom of her unforgiving bed have been all but washed away. Broward knows now that he has been defeated by the mighty Moira River, and vows one day to return to her, to exact his vengeance upon her. He follows his highly trained inner compass and heads across town. He makes a radio call on his CB to the detachment in Abilene to advise them of his plan. Unfortunately, the CB only has a broadcasting capability of 5 miles. Moments later, he checks into this facility for an evaluation and is eventually stripped of his clothing and identity. He is now John Doe, and he will spend the rest of his days here in this facility in Belleville. Jessica Murdoch's death could remain forever unsolved, and Francis Gillian Terpstra is somewhere, walking as a free man, no longer hunted by the brave Texas sheriff. The case stays cold. Back in Abilene, Deputy John Smith still watches the skies, in hopes that one day Broward will be returned to the people that loved him.
If you're out there, Joe, you can see this, you can hear this. I want y'all to know that everybody in Abilene misses you and wishes you'd come on back.
In the meantime, Sheriff Joe Broward will be remembered as the man who left Abilene never to return. I'm Kurt Billis.